Something unusual has been happening across the United States, and most people only see the surface of it. Headlines talk about people packing up, moving trucks crossing state lines, and certain regions gaining residents while others quietly lose them. That's the first major hook. This isn't just random movement. It's a measurable shift in where Americans choose to live. The second hook is even more surprising. These moves aren't driven by one single factor. It's not only about housing prices, taxes, weather, or jobs. For most families, the decision to leave a state comes from a complicated mix of financial pressure, lifestyle goals, career flexibility, and long-term planning. Here's the third hook many people overlook. When people leave a state, it doesn't always mean the place is collapsing. Population change can happen even in states with strong economies, beautiful scenery, and deep history. What's changing is what people value and how much they're willing to pay for it. And the fourth hook is the most important of all. While some states are losing residents, others are gaining them at record rates. That contrast is reshaping housing markets, infrastructure planning, job opportunities, and even political representation. Understanding why people move is quickly becoming one of the most important stories in modern America. Relocation has always been part of American life. From westward expansion to industrial migration to suburban growth, people have consistently moved toward opportunity. What makes the current trend different is speed and scale. With remote work becoming more common, people no longer need to live near specific offices. That flexibility has unlocked choices that simply didn't exist a generation ago. Housing costs are one of the biggest pressures driving relocation today. In many states, prices and rents have risen faster than wages for years. Families who once managed comfortably now face shrinking living spaces, longer commutes, or the inability to save. For some, moving isn't about chasing luxury. It's about restoring financial breathing room. Taxes and everyday expenses also play a role. Property taxes, state income taxes, insurance costs, and utility bills vary widely across the country. Over time, even small differences add up. When households run the numbers and realize they could reduce monthly costs by relocating, the idea becomes difficult to ignore. Climate and natural disaster risk are increasingly part of these decisions as well. Extreme heat, storms, flooding, drought, and wildfire risk can affect insurance premiums and long-term security. Some people move to avoid these hazards, while others accept them for career or family reasons. Either way, environmental factors now sit firmly on relocation checklists. Job markets remain central. Some states are gaining residents because industries like technology, healthcare, logistics, and manufacturing are expanding there. Others lose residents when specific sectors shrink or fail to grow quickly enough. Workers often follow opportunity, especially younger adults building careers. Lifestyle is another growing factor. People think about school systems, traffic, healthcare access, outdoor recreation, safety, and community culture more than ever. After experiencing remote work or lockdowns, many Americans reevaluated what they actually want day to day. That reflection pushed some toward quieter towns, while others sought faster-growing metros with new development. It's also important to understand that these population changes rarely happen evenly within a state. One metro area might be booming while a rural region struggles. Coastal cities might lose residents while inland suburbs grow. The story is complex, layered, and constantly evolving. Media headlines sometimes oversimplify these trends, turning nuanced migration patterns into dramatic narratives. In reality, most moves are personal, practical decisions rather than symbolic statements. Families relocate for affordability, proximity to relatives, new job offers, or retirement plans far more often than for abstract reasons. Another overlooked aspect is that leaving a state doesn't necessarily mean cutting ties forever. Some people move temporarily, planning to return later. Others maintain businesses, vacation homes, or family connections across state lines. Mobility has become part of modern life. As we move through this video, we'll examine 10 states that have seen notable outmigration in recent years and explore the most common reasons residents cite for leaving. The goal isn't to criticize these places. They continue to attract millions of people and offer opportunity to many, but to understand the pressures that motivate relocation. These patterns matter because population shifts influence everything from housing construction to school funding to transportation planning. When residents leave, governments adjust budgets. When people arrive, infrastructure expands. The movement of Americans quietly reshapes the nation year by year. In the next part, we'll begin looking at the first group of states on this list and the specific economic and lifestyle pressures that residents often point to when explaining why they decided to move. The first big hook in this part is simple but powerful. Many of the states people are leaving are not low-opportunity places. They're high-cost ones. Over the past decade, housing, insurance, childcare, and transportation expenses have climbed rapidly in several regions, pushing middle-class families to reconsider where they can realistically build long-term stability. The second hook is that these states often remain economically productive. They generate innovation, tourism, and business growth, yet everyday residents sometimes struggle to keep pace with rising prices. This tension between prosperity and affordability sits at the heart of many relocation decisions. A third hook is how uneven these pressures can be. Some metro areas explode in popularity and price, while smaller cities inside the same state remain relatively stable. When people leave, they're often reacting to very local conditions rather than rejecting an entire state. The fourth hook is that job flexibility has changed the rules. Remote and hybrid work allow employees to keep income while lowering living costs, turning relocation into a realistic option rather than a last resort. Housing remains the most frequently cited reason for moving. In certain states, median home prices have surged far faster than wages. Renters face limited supply and rising lease renewals, while buyers struggle with down payments and bidding wars. Over time, these pressures push households to look elsewhere for relief. Property taxes and insurance premiums also weigh heavily. In regions exposed to wildfire, hurricanes, flooding, or earthquakes, insurance costs have increased significantly. Even homeowners who purchased years ago sometimes find monthly expenses creeping upward, making once affordable areas harder to maintain. Transportation adds another layer. Long commutes caused by housing sprawl increase fuel and vehicle costs, while limited public transit in some regions forces families to rely on multiple cars. These recurring expenses may not seem dramatic individually, but over years they shape household budgets. Job markets further complicate the picture. Some states have seen strong growth in specific industries, such as technology or energy, but slower expansion in others. Workers whose skills don't align with dominant sectors may find fewer opportunities locally and begin scanning other states for better matches. Younger adults, in particular, tend to be mobile. Early career workers often chase salary growth, professional networks, and advancement. If opportunities concentrate elsewhere, they follow. Over time, this movement can shift population patterns noticeably. Retirees also contribute to outmigration. Many older Americans relocate from high-cost states to areas with lower taxes, cheaper housing, and warmer or more moderate climates. Their decisions are typically practical rather than political, centered on stretching savings and maintaining quality of life. Families with children often evaluate school systems, neighborhood stability, and space. In expensive states, larger homes may be out of reach, pushing parents toward markets where they can afford yards, additional bedrooms, and shorter commutes. Another overlooked factor is business relocation. Companies sometimes move headquarters or open new offices in states with lower operating costs or growing labor pools. When that happens, employees may transfer or leave entirely, contributing to population shifts. It's also important to remember that population loss doesn't necessarily mean decline everywhere. Some cities within high-cost states continue to grow, fueled by immigration, new construction, or industry clusters. Meanwhile, other areas shrink. The result is a patchwork rather than a uniform trend. Public services play a role too. Residents evaluate healthcare access, infrastructure quality, transportation systems, and public safety. When these systems struggle to keep pace with growth or budget pressures, people may consider relocating. The media often frames these moves dramatically, but for most families, the process is careful and calculated. They compare spreadsheets, research housing markets, visit potential destinations, and talk to employers. Moves happen slowly, one household at a time. As relocation becomes more common, states losing residents face challenges but also opportunities. Governments may invest in housing supply, adjust tax policies, or promote economic diversification to retain and attract residents. In the next part, we'll shift from broad economic forces to examine how climate, geography, and environmental risks influence where Americans choose to live, and why those factors increasingly appear in relocation decisions. The first major hook here is that weather is no longer just a preference. It has become a financial calculation. Extreme heat waves, stronger storms, wildfire seasons, drought, and flooding increasingly affect daily life and long-term budgets. For many households, these environmental pressures quietly tip the scale toward relocating. The second hook is that these risks don't appear evenly across the map. Some states face repeated hurricane seasons. Others experience prolonged drought, while certain regions confront wildfire exposure or coastal erosion. People compare these patterns when deciding where they want to settle for decades, not just years. The third hook is how insurance has entered the conversation. Home and flood insurance premiums in high-risk zones have risen sharply in some areas, sometimes doubling over a short period. Even when homes remain affordable to buy, ongoing insurance costs can push families to rethink their location. The fourth hook is that quality of life extends beyond finances. Air quality, water availability, outdoor recreation, and everyday comfort influence decisions just as much as spreadsheets. Climate shapes routines, health, and long-term peace of mind. Wildfire risk has become a growing concern in parts of the West. Smoke events can disrupt daily life for weeks at a time, while evacuation orders and property damage weigh heavily on residents. Even people who love mountain landscapes sometimes decide the uncertainty is too stressful. Coastal states face their own challenges. Rising sea levels, storm surge, and repeated flooding can damage homes and infrastructure. Some communities invest heavily in protective systems, but residents still factor in the possibility of repairs, insurance changes, and long-term property value uncertainty. Heat plays a role in desert and southern regions. Extended heat waves increase energy bills, strain power grids, and limit outdoor activity during summer months. While many residents adapt, others prefer climates that allow year-round comfort and lower cooling costs. Water availability has also become part of relocation discussions, especially in drought-prone regions. Restrictions on landscaping, higher utility rates, and concerns about long-term supply influence how people view future stability. Air quality is another factor. Regions affected by wildfire smoke, industrial pollution, or heavy traffic can see spikes in respiratory issues. Families with children or older relatives often prioritize cleaner air when choosing where to live. It's important to avoid oversimplification. Many states facing environmental challenges also offer extraordinary natural beauty, strong economies, and resilient communities. Millions of people remain and thrive in these places. The story isn't about abandonment. It's about shifting risk tolerance. Infrastructure investment can offset some environmental pressures. Flood control systems, wildfire management programs, water recycling projects, and energy grid upgrades help communities adapt. When residents see governments responding effectively, they may be more inclined to stay. Healthcare access intersects with climate as well. Heat-related illness, smoke exposure, and disaster recovery require strong medical systems. Areas with limited healthcare infrastructure may feel less secure to vulnerable populations. Remote work again plays a role here. People no longer need to live near certain climates for specific industries, so they have more freedom to choose environments that match personal comfort. That flexibility amplifies the impact of climate considerations. Another overlooked piece is mental well-being. Constant emergency alerts, evacuation preparations, or disaster recovery can take a psychological toll over time. Some families decide they'd rather trade scenic views for predictability. At the same time, new residents often replace those who leave. Some people are drawn to coastal beauty or mountain living regardless of risk, especially if they can afford mitigation measures. Population change is rarely one-directional. State and local governments monitor these trends closely. Shifts in population affect tax bases, infrastructure planning, and emergency services funding. Adaptation strategies increasingly shape long-term development plans. As environmental factors become more visible in daily life, they are likely to remain part of relocation decisions for years to come. They don't act alone, but they interact with cost, jobs, and lifestyle in powerful ways. In the next part, we'll explore how taxes, regulations, and government policies influence where Americans choose to live, and why those issues often appear in relocation conversations. The first hook in this section is that government policy rarely causes people to move on its own, but it often becomes the final factor in a long list of considerations. After accounting for housing, jobs, and climate, many families take a close look at taxes, regulations, and public services before deciding whether staying makes sense. The second hook is how differently these policies affect households. What feels manageable to a high-income professional or large business might feel burdensome to a middle-class family or retiree on a fixed income. That gap shapes migration patterns in subtle but powerful ways. The third hook is that people experience state policies locally. Property tax bills, school funding, road conditions, licensing requirements, and utility regulations show up in everyday life far more than abstract statewide debates. The fourth hook is that comparison drives decisions. With information easily available online, residents routinely compare tax rates, fees, and service levels across states before making a move. State income taxes often draw the most attention. Some states collect higher income taxes to fund expansive public services, while others rely more heavily on sales or property taxes. Families weigh whether the services they receive feel proportional to the costs they pay. Property taxes can be just as influential, especially for homeowners. Rising assessments increase annual bills, sometimes faster than incomes grow. Retirees in particular watch these costs carefully when planning long-term budgets. Regulatory environments also affect business owners and workers. Licensing rules, zoning restrictions, environmental regulations, and construction permitting processes shape how easy it is to start or expand a business. Entrepreneurs sometimes relocate to states they perceive as more flexible or faster moving. On the employment side, workers consider labor markets, wage laws, and industry concentration. Some states encourage certain sectors through incentives or infrastructure investment, attracting new residents in the process. Public services are part of the equation as well. Residents evaluate school quality, transportation networks, healthcare systems, emergency services, and public safety. When people feel these systems are under strain, frustration can grow. Infrastructure maintenance plays a role too. Roads, bridges, water systems, and transit networks require constant investment. States with aging infrastructure may face higher taxes or service disruptions, which influence relocation decisions. It's important to avoid framing these issues in purely ideological terms. Many people move for practical financial reasons rather than political statements. Families compare numbers, commute times, and school districts more often than legislative platforms. Business relocation is another factor. When companies move offices or manufacturing facilities, employees often follow. States that offer incentives for corporate expansion may gain residents, while those that lose major employers may see out migration. Local governments also compete to attract residents through housing development, tax abatements, and quality of life investments. These efforts can slow or reverse population losses in certain areas. Migration data often reflects a combination of these forces rather than a single cause. A household might leave because housing became expensive, insurance premiums rose, commuting worsened, and taxes tipped the scale. Rarely is there just one reason. Another overlooked point is that people's priorities change over time. Young professionals might tolerate higher taxes in exchange for career opportunities, while later in life, they seek lower costs and quieter surroundings. These life stage shifts shape population flows. Despite outmigration in some states, many continue to attract international immigrants, students, and new graduates. Population trends depend on who is leaving, who is arriving, and how many in each group. States facing resident losses often respond with policy adjustments, housing initiatives, or infrastructure upgrades aimed at retaining and attracting households. These changes can alter trends over time. In the final part, we'll bring everything together by examining how all these factors, cost, climate, jobs, and policy, combine in real household decisions, and what the future might hold for states experiencing population shifts. The first hook in this closing section is that most relocation decisions don't happen overnight. Families rarely wake up and suddenly choose to leave a state. Instead, the choice builds slowly through rising expenses, lifestyle changes, job opportunities elsewhere, environmental considerations, and long-term planning. The second hook is that people don't move because a place is bad. They move because another place seems better suited to their current stage of life. What works in one decade may not work in the next. That reality explains why even beautiful, economically strong states can experience resident losses. The third hook is how personal these calculations really are. Two households living on the same street can reach completely different conclusions about whether to stay or go. One might value proximity to work and culture, while another prioritizes space, affordability, and calmer surroundings. The fourth hook is that these choices add up. When thousands of families make similar decisions, the combined effect becomes visible in census data, housing markets, and infrastructure planning. Individual moves turn into statewide trends. Most households begin with practical research. They examine housing prices, taxes, insurance rates, school districts, healthcare access, and commute times. Online tools make it easier than ever to compare locations, run budgets, and explore neighborhoods before visiting in person. Job security often sits at the center of the decision. Some people move because they receive a new offer elsewhere. Others relocate to regions with growing industries. Remote workers look for places that allow their salaries to stretch further without sacrificing quality of life. Family ties also matter. Being closer to relatives for childcare, elder care, or emotional support can outweigh purely financial considerations. Many moves happen not because of economics alone, but because relationships pull people towards certain places. Retirement planning plays a major role too. Fixed incomes encourage careful cost calculations. Many retirees seek lower housing prices, reduced taxes, and access to health care. Climate comfort and recreational opportunities also influence these choices. Quality of life factors are difficult to quantify, but deeply influential. Traffic congestion, crowding, school experiences, access to nature, cultural activities, and neighborhood feel all shape satisfaction. When everyday frustrations accumulate, relocation becomes more appealing. The impact of these moves extends beyond individual families. States losing residents may face slower tax revenue growth, shifting political representation, and changes in school enrollment. States gaining residents must expand housing, transportation, and public services to keep pace. Housing markets respond quickly to migration. Outmigration can cool prices in some areas, while in-migration pushes them higher elsewhere. Builders, landlords, and city planners adjust strategies based on these patterns. Local economies shift as well. Restaurants, retailers, and service providers follow population changes. Some communities reinvent themselves to attract new residents, while others focus on supporting long-term locals. It's also worth noting that population trends rarely move in straight lines. A state that loses residents one year may gain them the next. Economic cycles, housing construction, policy changes, and climate events can all influence future movement. Governments track these patterns closely. Census data guides funding decisions for transportation, education, and healthcare. Understanding why people move helps policymakers design responses aimed at retention and growth. Looking forward, experts expect mobility to remain high. Remote work, aging populations, climate adaptation, and housing affordability will continue shaping where Americans choose to live. The map of population growth is likely to keep evolving rather than settling into a fixed pattern. The story of people leaving certain states is not about failure or abandonment. It's about choice, flexibility, and changing priorities in a country where mobility has always been part of the culture. As viewers, the most important takeaway is this: migration reflects real-life trade-offs. Every state offers advantages and challenges, and what matters most is finding the place that fits your needs, goals, and stage of life.